you still up? You're lying if you're telling us that. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered Postgame Show. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson. We're back on the actual right side of the fence, breaking down everything that we saw between the hedges as Georgia secures a 44-42 overtime victory. Not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, not six, not seven. 8 overtimes. 8 overtimes in Athens. Real quickly, make sure that you like the video, hit that ring notification down below, and make sure that you hit subscribe because we're breaking down everything surrounding college football. More importantly, we're breaking down everything in the SEC. The fight to the finish has somehow, some way, we are going to see teams make it to the college football playoff in this conference. And this is the number one source for all things SEC. Make sure that also you're following us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and make sure you check out all of our great work found at secunfiltered.com. This postgame show is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. Black Friday is upon us. Crazy chaotic weekend is upon us, but then the holiday season is right around the corner. And what better gift to give somebody in your life than a RHOBACK pullover, a RHOBACK fleece, a RHOBACK hoodie, whatever you see fit. Make sure that you go to RHOBACK.com, use the promo code SECU at sign up to get a 20% offer with your first purchase. 20% off your very first purchase. It's the perfect holiday stocking stuffer. Make sure you go visit SECU at RHOBACK.com. Tell them the fine folks at SEC Unfiltered sent you. Dave, this game was weird. This game was topsy-turvy. Trust me, if you and I both went back and looked at the preview, we could have expected this to be a 4-quarter battle. In fact, you and I both said that it would, but we figured that at some point Georgia would pull away. There's a lot of things that went into this game, and unfortunately, we got to say the quiet part out loud. For any SEC truther that would demand that the SEC is the most perfect conference in all of college football, this is one of those games where you have to sit down and just shut up. I'm not saying that the SEC cannot win a national championship this year. I'm not saying that if you put 4 or 5 teams in this year that they would not dominate the competition. What I'm saying is this is not one of those games that you get to hold your hat on. 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech in your own backyard. There's no way that you get to sit here and say, we are the most dominant conference tonight. Nope. You got to win. You probably clinch your spot in the college football playoff. That's it. That's all you get to say at this point.
Yeah, no, I mean, Georgia's in. It wasn't pretty, but you'll take it. That's a phenomenal game. I know that had to be mentally exhausting for the team, for both teams, for the fans. I was a part of the LSU A&M 7 overtime. It changed the rules. That was just exhausting. That game. So I can only imagine you're sitting there and you'll be sitting there till 3 or 4 in the morning and it'll hit you and it's that late. What awesome game. I mean, we can complain. I'm with you, Cole. You were talking. I'm not a big fan of the new overtime rules. I hate how we switch fields after 2-point conversion. Switch sides of the field.
It's so dumb.
Time. I mean, I get you don't want to wear out one side of the field, potentially injured. It's still, it's like, God, we got to find something better. But no, I mean, dude, when I first think of this game, just specifically the game, before we get into what it means for Georgia, obviously they're going to Atlanta. I mean, they're in the SEC. I think they joined. Who would you say, Cole? I think they joined Oregon. Is the other team? It's officially probably not officially. I mean, I think Oregon's in.
Oregon's in at this point.
Georgia's in.
I think Texas is in, personally. I still think Texas is in at this point.
Even at 10-2 with a lost A&M.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say for sure fire. I'd say those 2 teams are for sure fire in, Georgia and Oregon, no matter what happens the rest of the way for them. But my thing comes about Haynes King, dude. What a freaking game from that kid. I know he had the fumble Dan Jackson forced, but man, dude, that guy was a warrior. Kirby said it in postgame. Jimbo's favorite son, Haynes King, baby. Getting it, just keeping the Yellow Jackets in it. He came into the game already banged up. That was an impressive performance by that kid. It really was. I mean, Kirby said it as well. They out-physical Georgia. I mean, we've seen Georgia get out-physical a couple of times this year, but when they needed to make plays, they made plays. Dan Jackson making plays on defense. Carson Beck in the second half really started to hit his stride. It was about time someone decided, Bear, that they wanted to run the football in overtime. It took only, 5 or 6 overtimes for someone to finally establish the run. But, man, fun game. We were not expecting I mean, you're right. I didn't think it'd be a total blowout. Me and you both said that in the preview. I mean, I'd be lying to you if I thought that this game was going to be.
Nobody thought
down the
8
wire.
overtimes eventually afterwards would be the conversation. Nobody thought that.
No, I would agree with you. But phenomenal game, though. A phenomenal game, fun, clean, old-fashioned hate. Man, Britt Key's got Georgia Tech going the right way. I know we're an SEC channel, but that's just somehow way. Just off the top of your head, you're like, I mean, I was impressed with Georgia Tech, man. Their effort out there, they out physical Georgia. But Georgia punching their ticket to the college football playoff, man. You know, this season, I think, is taking a lot out of Kirby. He looks exhausted, just kind of checked out at times. I think he gets frustrated just with the environment of the sport right now, and it kills his depth. And you can,
brother, you and I are having a nice cold beverage at this point. He needs one. He 100% needs one after tonight's game because of my God, the exhaustion on his face by the 8th overtime. Get in, get out. We don't care. Just get us to Atlanta next week. Let's sit down, shut up, and figure this out. The fact that Georgia Tech set the tone so early in this game, I don't think was very surprising to either of us. We kind of thought this was going to be a 4-quarter battle, and in the 4th, we would see the dominance of Georgia kind of pull away. But the fact of the matter is that when you look back at Haynes King and his success, or very limited, but the potential that he had at Texas A&M, I think really was the tone setter. Because if you talk to anybody around the College Station area, you talk to people that work in the scouting industry, you talk to people that understand the Texas A&M background, this was somebody that had a lot of potential coming in from Longview. He won a state championship. He was the son of a high school coach. He was very well liked by those inside of the locker room. He was very well liked by the coaching staff at Texas A&M. He just never was able to, number one, stay healthy. The inconsistencies in that Appalachian State game eventually cost him to move to Max Johnson. Him and Jimbo Fisher eventually did not see eye to eye to where he decided to transfer. But the fact is that he was prepared for this matchup because if he had played in these high aptitude games, he had been in these environments before. Remember, he played at Bryant-Denny Stadium against Jalen Milroe in that 24-22 down to the wire finish where if that 2-point conversion converts, we're talking about an overtime game in Bryant-Denny. So this is not your average ACC quarterback. This is somebody that gets the atmosphere of playing in the SEC on primetime television. It was a performance to where if you go back to the very beginning of the game and say it's 17-0 at the half, you would figure Georgia has one drive to capitalize. And if they aren't able to get some points out of this, this would probably be a moot point. Georgia Tech really did show you tonight why they were competitive in that matchup against Florida State. Even if Florida State was like, say, 7-5 at the start of the year, they gave you an emphasis on why this team is special. In the matchup against Syracuse, why it went down to the wire, they're really only 2 or 3 plays away this season from being in the hunt for a college football playoff berth. Like, that's how talented Georgia Tech has been all year.
Yeah, ACC pretty open conference too, middle of it. And pretty much I feel like in most conferences this year, and you couldn't say this for years, a 6-6 team on a given day, we've seen it in every conference this year outside of the Big Ten. Really, the Big Ten's the only one it hadn't happened. And I think the Big Ten has the best top-heavy teams, if that makes sense. I think the Big Ten's the best league at the top. From top to I really do. At least I know we're an SEC channel, but I try to be unbiased. Just from being a former football guy, I'm calling a spade a spade. I think Ohio State, Oregon are the best 2 teams in the country. But I think in the SEC, ACC, Big 12 this year, I think you could see a 6-6 team beat the top team in the league on a given day. And we've seen it. Again, I don't think Alabama's the top team in the league, but we've seen it with the 6-6 Vanderbilt team. I think the SEC is the deepest league. I think top heavy this year. I'd have to give it to the Big Ten, though.
Well, still think about this for a minute. Every other conference, you know that the middle of the pack would not sustain the success the SEC has. But at the very top, compared to the very top of the SEC, they can go toe-to-toe. And this is where, again, you look at college football right now and you look at the future of what is going to be this sport, whether it be in the Big 12, whether it be in the ACC, whether it be in the Big 10. Everybody can say at the same time, hey, we have the very top heavy teams because of this is what's going to happen with the NIL collective. This is what's going to happen with the transfer portal. This is what's going to happen when you don't have the right depth. People are going to transfer to different schools and they're going to want to see immediate playing time, and they're going to. And because of that, that's what's going to separate the SEC more than anything else. But still, The fact that Georgia was able to come back, I think, says a lot about the future of what Carson Beck can be. The problem with Georgia is we know this, and I've been on this kind of track for probably 4 or 5 weeks now. When Georgia is at its peak, it may be the most dangerous team in the conference. Here's the problem, Dave. They've only been at their peak for about 6 quarters all year. Like, that's the issue, is that they've had their moments where they have shown you how talented they can be, how dominant they can be, what the version of this team can carry on over. But it's only been for about maybe a game and a half between 11 games this year. And that's a concern the way you get to the college football playoff when you go up against, say, I don't know, an Indiana, when you go up against, say, I don't know, Penn State. If you do not deliver, you're going to allow this team to stay too close for comfort.
No, I know. I agree with you. You haven't seen, like you said, I think you go anywhere from 4 to 6. You talk about a half against Alabama. Let's be honest, a half against Texas. I mean, I think the defense played well the entire game against Texas, but the offense had 3 turnovers. Carson Beck was bad in that game, really, if you want to be completely honest. Yeah, Georgia this year is interesting. It's
well, hold up. Carson Beck was bad in the first half. Carson Beck in the second half was able to kind of come back and at least make this thing interesting.
You have 3 interceptions. You're going to get graded poorly by your offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach. It ain't going to be. You played well in the second half, though, bud. It's like 3 turnovers, man. You're killing us. Like,
wait, are you talking about not tonight's game? Are you talking about in the
no, I'm talking about against Texas.
Oh, Texas game.
Back. Yeah. But no, I mean, Georgia just in general this year, you've seen them get out physical some this year, and it's not something we're accustomed to seeing. What the defense really has not been. It's been a very bend and break defense a lot of times this year. I mean, again, I'm calling somebody out on here that's on the Thorpe Award watch, and I have no idea why he is, because I don't even think he's played the best secondary. I don't even think he's played the best football in his own secondary. How Malachi Starks this year is on the Jim Thorpe Award when Dan Jackson's. He's not even the best DB. Upside, he is the most. He's the highest upside of anybody on that back end. But he ain't really been playing up to it. That's why a little surprised me. And you were texting. You were talking about how Travis Hunter should have been on it. And I agree with you. I was like, how is Malachi Starks? Like, he's kind of had and not a bad year, but very, wouldn't I say, a Thorpe Award watch list or semifinalist on there. But yeah, just Georgia across the board. Inconsistent play all over the place. Defense gets bullied at times, which we're, again, not accustomed to seeing. I know offense has had its injuries. But again, it's either Carson Beck will be really off, or we'll have a Dylan Bell or an Arian Smith drop. I mean, it's what it is. We can't get to go in. The backfield's been banged up. Nate Frazier's finally getting going, but he's had fumble issues. I don't know. The tight ends have really never got going. They haven't been able to own the middle of the field like they had the last 2 or 3 years. And I understand that. I mean, you got Brian Bowers, you got Ladd McConkey. They changed things. But overall, just this team, it's just a weird – it's almost like icky, like, kind of comes on. It's just kind of like I made a bet preseason. I was on Michael Lombardi's show, and they asked me a question. I went and actually made the bet. Preseason, would you take Ohio State and Georgia versus the field? If one of those teams go win, I put $50 on this. The winner, if one of those teams win the national championships, I win the bet. Georgia and Ohio State. And sometimes I'm just like, how Georgia keeps hanging on for me. And both those teams are going to make the playoffs. Give me a shot for it, Bear. But I definitely feel better about Ohio State living up for your boys' bet than I do Georgia right now. For Georgia to go win 4 games here, I think it's good competition.
No, I mean, here's the problem. If you ask me right now, Georgia, the way their offense looked tonight, that's going to carry on over into the college football playoff. No, I don't believe they could win a national championship. Not even remotely close, because it's too inconsistent. Yes, you get a surging second half from Carson Beck. I mean, 5 touchdowns on the night. This is the version of Carson Beck that you need to win a national championship. And you and I have talked about this multiple times. When you look at the college football playoff, there's 2 things that you need. Number 1 is depth, and number 1 is a qualified quarterback. I think Carson Beck, the second half version of him, is a qualified quarterback that can carry you deeper and deeper and deeper into the postseason, especially when you have a potent run game, whether that be with Cash Jones and Nate Frazier, whether that be with Trevor Etienne, whoever it is, you can be sustainable. But you have to play it 4 quarters. A stable defense is not going to allow you to capitalize in the second half. And here's the bottom line. The fact that Georgia Tech was able to jump out to that sustainable lead is 100% a sign that they're trending in the right direction, but it also shows you they need to capitalize on the opening drive, and they couldn't. Here's something that really bothers me, Dave, and you know this better than I do because of just the sheer fact of working in the sport. When you look at that 2-point conversion after the touchdown pass to Oscar Delp, why are you going for it at that point? Because if we got to 8, because you got to 8 overtimes. If you don't go for that 2-point conversion, it's a 28-27 finish.
Yeah.
And at least then, okay, we win by a point. But you win and you save yourself 8 overtimes from worrying about it. And I understand maybe going for it in the fourth quarter, but that's the second drive of the third quarter. Why are you going for it?
Why are you trying to make it
aggressive right then and there? There's no reason to.
Yeah, I don't whatsoever. Understand that. I'm with you too, but I would love to hear the explanation. I mean, I'm sure it'll be something. That's what the analytics said, but it's going to be like, I hear you, but common sense tells me otherwise. I mean, it's like you said, why are you this early in the game trying to make it 10-8? Like
There's
this
no
early
reason.
in the game. I don't really understand. And then all right, let's just say you do call it. You're definitive. You are all about going for it. What the hell ever. Let's see the play. And you run that. It's like, gosh,
there were so many bad.
We're on the same page with that.
There were so many bad play calls from both sides throughout the game. Really, in the second half more than the first half. I thought the 2-point conversion was egregious at best. I thought after you got the penalty in the 6 overtime, and then you go ahead and you tuck it around with Haynes King, that was one of the single worst play calls you could do at that moment because you get a second chance. They kind of realize that this is somebody who can absolutely utilize his legs. They're probably going to plan for it. I have no idea why you go for that. And then again, the 4th and the 8th overtime, I have no idea why you're trying to go ahead and try and get the guy at the back of the end zone when you have an open lane if you're Haynes King. There's so many different things you can go with. Dave, I'm going to say the part that is probably really annoying to some people and for a lot of people that cover the SEC that know this conference, what it is, they're not going to appreciate this. And I'm very much okay with it. The play on the fumble, I know that we're going to say that it needs to be reviewed because of, again, it's a fumble. I still feel like that was a targeting call. Like, can you explain to me why it wasn't a targeting call when Haynes King gets the fumble and they're back deep inside their own territory? The way that it looked at that point, it felt like it was a targeting call, at least based off the initial emphasis.
You're talking about the one on Dan Jackson?
Yeah, Dane Jackson.
I need to go back, actually.
If you look at it, he leans with his head. And I'm not saying that wasn't the only call that changed the game. There were so many bad calls in this game on both sides. There were calls against Georgia Tech. There were calls against Georgia. Here's the one thing I will say. If somebody is in the comment section complaining about holding, guys, the bottom line is that if you love this sport, get used to holding calls getting missed. It's going to happen probably 9 times out of 10. It's 100% going to happen 9 times out of 10. You're going to miss 80% of the holding calls, and you're going to get a lot of them. You're going to get a few, and you're going to miss about 85%. So if that's what you're holding out hope for of, wow, what an egregious holding call. Guys, the fact they called several is enough in one game. I will say, I understand that he was a moving player, so defenseless, and they reviewed it because of whenever there is a turnover, they have to review if it is a targeting call. I completely get it. I'm just wondering what happened on that exact play because it did look like Jones was leading with his head.
No, I thought it was. I just went and searched on Twitter just to watch it again. By rule, yeah. I mean, he led with the crown, lowered his helmet. It should have been targeting, but yeah. I mean, I'm not one of those guys that says in that situation you can't because, again, at the end of the day, if it's a penalty with 1 second left or 1 second into the game, it should be called. I mean, it is what it is, right? It was a big play, big momentum play. Georgia Tech probably wins the football game. Let's be honest. If they call that, he's ejected, 15-yard penalty. The way they were running the football, yeah, I mean, nothing would tell me that Georgia stops them and gets them off the field. I mean, no, I'm with you. I think that was a targeting call.
No, but I again, there was also one at the back of the end zone when Lubbock got the touchdown pass. That looked like he leaned with his head. Like there were many missed calls in this game. It wasn't just that one.
Yeah, I mean,
that was the one that led to a turnover.
No, I mean, it's every week now in this sport. They just have to fix it this offseason. You got one more week, and then depending how many of these officials get scheduled to go participate in these playoffs will be interesting. I'll actually be interested to see how they divide that up, those responsibilities, honestly, with the playoffs. It's actually somebody should probably do an article on that. Sounds like something that Conor O'Garago would go do.
I think that the other thing that's really important here is that we saw tonight there was that common balance. Listen, I understand that when you look at the 7 overtime game for Texas A&M versus LSU, that was way too much. I completely get it. There's rules and regulations that have to go into that to where you change it. But can we stop at the 2-point conversion BS? Like, there has to be a reason why you're able to capitalize. Because of when we get to the third overtime, when you look at the first one, you have to drive. When you look at the second one, you have to drive. It's at the 25-yard line, but still, even if you're in that 25-yard line range, it's guaranteed if you have a qualified kicker, you are going to get a field goal out of it. There has to be some different regulation. But the 2-point conversion attempt, I am sorry, I can't get behind it. And tonight was a perfect example of it. What if, just humor me, they get Georgia gets a penalty where it is a roughing the passer call, and now it's down at the 1-yard line and they convert. And then there's another roughing the passer call and they convert. Where instead, if you're, say, at the 50-yard line, you get a roughing the passer call, you get 15 yards. The other team gets a holding call, they're back. It makes no sense. It's little things like that. It's completely asinine that we're still dealing with what is the proper way to go through what is an actual overtime ruling.
Because NFL overtime.
Because the 7 overtime thing, I get the reasoning behind it, but this is completely egregious on the opposing side.
Yeah, no, I agree. It kind of feels like a game of horse. It's kind of what you feel like you're going back and forth, and you go walk to the other end after 2 plays. Yeah, I mean, it seems like you're wasting a lot of time and it's inefficient. I like the NFL style. Obviously, you can't end these games with ties, and I'm up for that. But I kind of like, hey, both teams are going to get an opportunity here. If you stop them and score, you get a chance. I mean, I actually like the NFL rules better. I'll be honest with you, I kind of like the old college rules better than this. Now, granted, you're potentially putting yourself in a much longer game that I experienced, but I don't know. I just feel like it's more football. It's instead of just back and forth 2-point conversions from the 3-yard line, it just kind of seems a little excessive, and I don't know. I feel like nobody really likes it.
Look, do me a favor. If you give me a 12-minute overtime quarter and you say, here's the deal. You guys, if they score a touchdown and you don't, then game's over. If you get a field goal, they get an opportunity to score. Same thing. If you get a 4th down and both you punt 3 times, then guess what? Game's over. But instead, we're trying to decide at the 1-yard line. And I'm not taking anything away from Georgia Tech because you want to what? When you look at Georgia Tech got that extra play. There was the holding call against Smell Munden, and they decided to go for a 1-yard tuck and run. And it's like, why are you doing that when they already know that Haynes King's mobility is his asset? It is his best overall trait. If you utilize his legs, he is going to find a way to get in it. They corralled the box. It was basically like a cover 0 blitz at that point. But say it's instead a 1st and 10 at the 30-yard line. At least then, if you're Georgia Tech, you're walking away with points. And if you're Georgia, you're shutting them out and you're pushing them deeper back to where they're out of field goal range. And keep in mind, earlier in the game, there was a missed field goal opportunity to where Georgia Tech could have been up by 20 at halftime. Like, people kind of forget that. They were deep in their own territory. They missed, like, what was that, 28-yard field goal in the second quarter?
A kick shot.
And so, like, if you miss that kick in overtime, the ball's back in Georgia's hands. Nobody's complaining because that could have been an easy moment to where Georgia Tech is up by 20 points going into the third quarter, and Georgia is forced to go for it on every single drive instead of settling for a point after attempt.
Yeah, no, Georgia Tech did leave some stuff. It leave some opportunities in the first aspect. Haynes King missing the kid in the back of the end zone wide open. It would instead of settling for the field goal they ultimately missed. He had a lot of opportunities there for Georgia Tech. I mean, I thought Buster Faulkner called a good game. A little weird storyline. He had Buster Faulkner, OC at Georgia Tech, and Todd Hartley, tight ends coach at Georgia, both interviewed for the Southern Miss head job. I think they're the final 2 candidates. So, and I think maybe what's my guy's name over at totally forget his name.
What school?
Charles Huff, sorry, Marshall's head coach. This is who I thought I would probably be the 3 people for that job. That was
the Southern Miss job?
Yeah. He wants Adam Marshall. I think he'd take it. if he got it. But I do know Buster Faulkner. I think Buster Faulkner's probably the guy I think that would potentially get that job, and Hartley too. But no, interesting. And I think Buster Faulkner, if he didn't, and Mike Bobo went and did the Will Muschamp kind of fade off into the analyst backseat, I think Kirby could bring Buster Faulkner back. So a lot of interesting little dynamics in there. I thought he called a good game, got in the flow with Haynes King. Georgia, and to me, Bear, just what keeps sticking with me is we're not used to seeing this, is just Georgia's defense is really taking a step back the last 2 years, not 22, from 23 to 24. Last year and this year, just miss any real pass rushers. It's easy to run in between the tackles on them. I don't know. It's not what we're accustomed to seeing.
Dave, let me ask you, just out of curiosity, if you looked at, not without looking at the third down conversion attempt, over under 50% for Georgia Tech.
Say it again. You cut out for a minute.
Over under 50% third down conversion rate for Georgia Tech.
Probably about like right at it.
52. If you looked at over under total yards, 400 or 450 or over.
I'd probably say just under.
No, 523. They give up 523 yards.
I mean, they had that drive in the second half that was 18 plays for 10 minutes and like 18 seconds. I tweeted about it. I forgot what the exact final second was, but it was 10.
And again,
I was like, oh my God. You almost hit the ball for an entire quarter.
You can't sit
that's
there.
Never done to Georgia, which I was like, man.
You can't sit there and also say, well, it's only because of his overtime. Because the overtime, you're at the 25-yard line and then you're at the 10-yard line. So it's like, it's impossible to say, no, you gave up over 485 yards through 4 quarters of action. The fact of the matter is that somehow you got a critical turnover deep in your own territory to be able to capitalize, to tie the game at 27 apiece. You forced a 4th down conversion. You got the ball back, which, by the way, I don't think that we're paying enough attention to. Imagine if that ball takes a risky jump when they stripped it out of Carson Beck's hands. And now it ricochets and it lands in the hands of some Georgia Tech defender. And he is off to the races for a 67-yard touchdown return. I mean, like, we're that close to this game ending in 2 different instances in regulation. A missed field goal opportunity, a missed PAT because of instead you went for 2, and a strip sack where you don't fall on the ball, you just capitalize, pick it up, and just run it back. From this ending in regulation and it being a completely different night. Dave, before we get on out of here, I think what's really interesting is that we've already seen today, Iowa got outgained by over 170 yards, yet they found a way to beat Nebraska. We watched as Ole Miss struggled at times with Mississippi State. We watched as Memphis beat Tulane. Rivalry week is alive and well, and chaos is still occurring. Like, this is far from the end of actual chaos. We are going to see more of these games go down to the wire tomorrow. And what's really interesting is that the SEC could benefit or could cannibalize itself to where they are out of the conversation completely. And it may not be just simply Georgia and Ole Miss. It may be Alabama losing in the Iron Bowl. It may be South Carolina losing to Clemson. It may be Tennessee losing to Vanderbilt. It could be Notre Dame losing to USC. It could benefit, and it could easily help the SEC, or it could hurt the SEC, depending on these matchups. But this was a good palate cleanser on what to expect this upcoming weekend, because we already knew that in a 12-team playoff scenario, we haven't been paying attention to the chaos that occurs in Week 14. Because if you're not in the top 6, nobody is paying attention to you. Now all eyes are on you if you're like in that 12 to 15 range. Can you get a win to secure your spot in the college football playoff?
I mean, how many do you think are going to get in, Bear? What do you think? Gun to your head right now.
With the SEC?
Yeah.
I still think 4. I think there's going to be some crazy upset tomorrow to where we're looking back and saying, okay, now we have to decide, is it Bama? Is it Ole Miss? Is it South Carolina? Who is the one that's getting in? Because if still, I believe that there will be some upset. I guarantee you 3. Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas. If Tennessee wins tomorrow, then all 3 are in. But if not, I still feel like there's at least a conversation that could be 4.
Yeah, Tennessee wins tomorrow. They punch their ticket. Georgia will be in. Like you said, Texas wins tomorrow. They're obviously in. Yeah, I mean, again, it all depends what else happens around the country. I mean, it's tough to say that. I mean, I asked you just asking, see.
Because think about this for a second, Dave.
You still got to worry about Notre Dame, USC, all the rest of the ACC games. What you got? Syracuse, Miami. You got SMU playing Clemson, South Carolina. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot still left to kind of shake out.
I mean, technically, there's a path for 5 because if it's somehow Texas A&M wins out and they beat Texas, they're in. And then also, depending on the other upsets, is Alabama in? Is Ole Miss in? Is South Carolina in? There's a path for 5. There certainly is a path for 4. Like I don't think enough people are paying attention to Alabama sitting at number 13 with the matchup between South Carolina and Clemson. If South Carolina wins and if one other team loses, Alabama's right back in the mix. So 4 is still in the running. 5, 100% is at least in the conversation at this point.
The key for it happening it starts with South Carolina beating Clemson. If Clemson were to beat South Carolina, you're right. Like that's why where Clemson and Alabama were this past week in the rankings really didn't mean anything because it's going to shake itself out. Like if Clemson was ranked below Alabama, if they beat South Carolina, they're probably jumping Alabama. If Clemson was ahead of Alabama, if they lose to South Carolina, they're going below. I mean, like you said, that's the key in the cog kind of thing. That game right there is kind of either that's going to start it or not. And now, I mean, from an Alabama perspective alone, I mean, Tennessee losing helps them. But if we're just talking about getting teams in, or if any team, Tennessee losing helps. But yeah, to your point, 4 teams, it's got to start with South Carolina beating Clemson.
Well, still think about this for a minute. What if Tennessee were to lose? Everyone else wins. Ole Miss won, Alabama won, South Carolina wins, and there's 2 other upsets. I mean, there's still technically a shot for 5 at that point because of the problem with Tennessee that I don't think enough people are paying attention to, Dave, is that if you're 9-3 and Alabama's 9-3, you hold the head-to-head against Alabama. So you're not going to get knocked entirely out because of that head-to-head. You didn't have the head-to-head against Georgia, but still at that point, you can make the case both of you are 9-3. Both of you have a really ugly loss on the radar. So I don't worry about that. And by the way, I think Tennessee wins tomorrow, so it's not going to be that big of a deal. But either way, even still, with Tennessee losing, it probably actually benefits you more so to say we have 5 getting it.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. No, I would agree with that for sure. I mean, I'm trying to think what's another wild scenario could happen.
Penn State losing to Maryland.
A&M winning the SEC would be wild. Because I don't think anybody's really counting A&M even. I mean, I'm not either because I don't think they're going to win the next 2. But, like, it would be a wild scenario. They beat Texas. They go on and beat Georgia. It's like, my God, they got the automatic berth.
No, like, but even still.
You know who that helps, though, Bear? I was thinking about it today. South Carolina.
Yep. That's the problem.
They beat the SEC. They beat the SEC champion. That would help them significantly from trying to get in front. I mean, if you're South Carolina, you want to go. Obviously, you got to go take care of your business against Clemson. You went behind Auburn beating Alabama. I mean, obviously Ole Miss already won, so you can't do it. But I mean, the real massive bumping them up strength of schedule wise. Oh man, if A&M could go win the SEC, which I think you would agree, a big stretch. But man, that would really amplify the Gamecock resume.
Here's the thing: if A&M were to win, and then somehow if South Carolina, like think about this, if somehow Miami lost tomorrow to Syracuse, Clemson goes to the ACC title game with a loss to South Carolina, and then they beat SMU and they're in. How do you not put South Carolina in at that point? Because if it's somehow the ACC and the SEC champion with losses to South Carolina clinch their playoff berth, you have to at least consider they beat them outright. And what if they beat them both by 20-plus points? Because they already have a 20-point win over A&M. And then they would have potentially a 20-point win over Clemson. If both those things happen, that really benefits South Carolina more than anybody else. But again, it starts with them. And everything else has to kind of help out afterwards. Like, they have to do it, but then a bunch of other things have to happen. Miami has to lose to Syracuse. I don't know if they will. We already know that we're talking about SMU. They're in the ACC title game. So regardless of what happens tomorrow, not going to be that big of a concern. Regardless, it's one of those things that we have to have that conversation on of everything is out of their control. 4 teams can't get in. Dave, I want to ask you before we get on out of here, when you look at Georgia's offense, tonight specifically, if that first half offense shows up against really any team. It doesn't matter if it's Big 10, it doesn't matter if it's ACC, it doesn't matter if it's Big 12. Do they have enough juice to where, say you're Kenny Dillingham, you're concerned in the second half?
For Georgia?
Yeah.
Against Arizona State?
Just any random team that's in the college football playoff.
Just my concern on offense. I've just come to accept Georgia's not going to play complete games. That's who they are. We just finished their 12th game. They are who they are. I fully expect them to go into the playoffs and do the exact same thing, especially if they have to travel on the road in that first game. So, is there any chance? Yeah, I guess depending, again, we got games to shake out. I guess they could play Arizona State in the first round if Arizona State would get the 4 seed, win in the Big 12 there. I think they definitely beat teams like Arizona State. I think Georgia would eventually lean on Indiana. I just think when they get into the games that they compare themselves to and the other teams that have the same goals and aspirations to go win the national championship, Oregon, Ohio State, I just don't know how Georgia matches up this year. That's wild to say. It is. It's just I don't know if they win those games this year. Nothing shows me this year what they have done outside of a first half against Texas would tell me they could beat either one of those teams. On a given day, certainly. But if I was betting money now.
Let me ask you.
Ohio State.
Let me ask you. I'm going to give you 5 teams. Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina. Let me give you one more. Tennessee. Of all those teams, if they were to play on the road in December and they were trailing by 10 points in the second half, who would be the one that you have the least faith in to be able to come back?
Trailing by 10 on the
10.
South Carolina, because I don't think they have the weapons on the outside to come back.
I think it's actually either Georgia or Tennessee. Personally.
I've seen Georgia do it. So I don't really know. Not on the road technically, but I've seen them in games like that. I don't know. I think you have to have big-time receivers in those situations to go big-time plays, and I'm probably going to go with the worst wide receiver unit out of the teams you gave me if I'm going to –
Sure.
I don't even think Georgia's is that great, but I think they're a little better than South Carolina. Not a little. I think they're better than South Carolina's.
If you ask me simply if they were down by 2 scores and they had to capitalize, the version of Carson Beck that showed up in the second half, again, we know what Carson Beck can be. We've seen it, and we've seen it especially this year in the Tennessee game. We saw it at times in the second half in the Alabama game. We saw it tonight. He can step up and deliver. But if you're asking me to be able to trust somebody to come back, I think that Georgia has a case. I think Tennessee has a case. I'm being the worst one. I think Tennessee maybe has a better case because I'm not trusting Nico Iamaleava. What I am saying is that Georgia at least has a case the way they look tonight. The fact that they needed the defense worried me more than the offense in the second half. That was the problem. The offense was able to deliver. I'm sorry, but still, I wonder about that.
Yeah, it wouldn't be joy. No, I've seen Georgia fight back and look back. That's also one of the comments that they came back big on the road against Alabama. So I'd trust them to come back. Out of those teams though, I'd have to go. I don't know. I like Lenore Sellers. At least he's gotten better. I just don't trust anybody helping him on the outside. And I don't know how many times he can just create and make plays if you're down 10 late in the fourth quarter.
I still feel like it's Tennessee. And again, Georgia, maybe I'm being a little bit too victim of the moment because their defense, the way they played tonight. Tennessee feels like the right answer. I get where South Carolina comes from. I just wonder. I really do, because of the fact that you had such a bad first half performance. And we've seen this multiple times this year from Georgia. We have. They have not been able to capitalize in the first half. They've been able to come back in the second. I just wonder, will their luck run out? But they're going to go to the playoff at this point. I can almost guarantee the way they looked, the way they went to 8 overtimes, the fact that they were able to create opportunities, the fact their defense stepped up in overtime, they guarantee their spot in the playoff. And again, I'm not going to doubt Georgia in the postseason. I'm really not, because of it's Kirby Smart, it's weeks to game plan, it's the ability to be able to come back and pull away. I don't worry about him whatsoever. This was just a performance to where I wonder, when does the luck run out? Because it didn't feel like, again, that first half against a Georgia Tech team, they really had nothing to lose. They were going to a bowl game. They didn't have to worry about going to an ACC title if they lost. They just were out there to kind of play a full 4-quarter performance. That's the part that worries me when it comes to a playoff game to where it's a little bit more minute. They're going to go into finite detail about their play calling. All those things aside, like, that's the part that worries me when it comes to a team like Georgia, especially if they match up on a team on the road. And again, if you're a part of the SEC, going to call it like it is. You can say that the SEC is the toughest conference, and I'm not going to argue with you. I don't think Dave is going to argue with you. But this is not one of those games where you get to go ahead and boast your chest out. Oh, yeah, 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech. Nope, you got to win. Be happy you got to win. Sit down, shut up, go to Atlanta, figure it out.
No, yeah, I agree. I mean, Georgia's in. Congrats. They're really well, hell, Cole, let's be honest. They're officially the first SEC team to punch their ticket into the playoffs.
Yeah, again, you can't say that really about anybody else. Maybe you could say Texas simply because I don't think that you'll leave out a 10-2 Texas. But we've seen crazier things happen.
I mean, if Texas rolls out there and gets rolled, which I'm not saying that's not my prediction. I think A&M's going to win the game. I'm not saying they get, but remember, that'll be everybody's lasting memory of them. You're right, though. I mean, with the way everything else is kind of shaking out, though, sometimes it's just maybe they weren't deserving, but you know what? You got to fill in a 12-team playoff, so a 10-2 team from the SEC is going to get in, whether they had a strong strength of schedule or not. I mean, I'm with you. I mean, if things kind of shake it, as long as Texas doesn't go out there and get embarrassed, and you never know. I mean, the whole Quinn Ewers stuff. I mean, Texas is going to sit on that, but also does the committee take that into effect? Think about that. They're like, well, I know Jordan Travis was out for the year. Quinn Ewers isn't out for the season thing, but they do take injuries into account. So it's another dynamic tomorrow. If Quinn Ewers, I mean, I'm sure he'll give it a go. But again, if he's nicked up, he definitely nicked up. But how much does he play? That could affect how the committee views this game.
Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on all the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson. Check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. We will be back tomorrow to break down. Dave, how many games are we doing? 4 or 5 tomorrow?
4, right?
4. Yeah. Yes, 4. I believe so. Make sure that you stick around for the Palmetto Bowl. Make sure that you stick around for the Iron Bowl. Make sure that you stick around for the Lone Star Showdown. And then Tennessee and Vanderbilt. Is that the other one we're doing?
Yep.
Tennessee and Vanderbilt. There we go. So make sure that you're back tomorrow morning. Make sure that you hit that ring notification because we are going to go live throughout the day tomorrow. Week 14, college football playoff. It's going to lead to chaos. This is 100% going to be a thing. But until next time, for Dave Shumate, Cole Thompson, peace.